It's Tuesday, November 15th, 2016, and you're listening to 3000 NFL Mock Draft. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about today. I am your host, Kenneth Arthur of fieldgoals.com, and with me is my host, the other host, my co-host, Rob Staten of SeahawksDraftBlog.com. And today we can talk about Christine Michael, CJ Procise, Seahawks Patriots, Seahawks Eagles, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, the college football playoffs, the Washington Huskies, the Washington State Cougars, Cam Chancellor, and so on and so forth. There's plenty to talk about today. I do want to start the show off up top with a little bit more of a programming note. I said it at the end of last week's podcast. These will be the last couple of episodes of 3000 NFL Mock Draft that you can find on the 3000 NFL Mock Draft RSS feed. If you're subscribed on iTunes or through SoundCloud, perhaps, everything through YouTube will be the same, and the show will continue, but you're going to want to subscribe to Seaside Chats with Kenneth Arthur in order to continue to get this. You know, part of the reason for this is just the fact that, we are now talking about the Seahawks pretty much every week. It has sort of, in a way, replaced Reel in the Field Goals and sort of giving us another place, an avenue where me and Rob will be talking about the Seahawks every week, in addition to the NFL draft and how it pertains to the Seahawks. So you do want to subscribe to that other channel. I'll put this up on the 3000 NFL Mock Draft RSS feed there on iTunes, so you'll get this. But by next week, make sure that you're subscribed to the other channel so that you don't miss out on any of these episodes of 3000 NFL Mock Draft, where we are talking about the Seahawks pretty much every week. So do that. And what we'll do right now is talk about the Seahawks. There's so much to get to, as I mentioned up top, but we'll start with the news that broke just before we started recording. Within the last hour, the Seattle Seahawks have reportedly released running back Christine Michael. It's not something that is really all that unexpected given Christine Michael's production, the way the coaches have talked about Christine Michael, the way that it seems he has been benched recently, and the return of Thomas Rawls, plus the outstanding play of CJ Procise, who we'll definitely talk about on this podcast today. But no more Christine Michael in Seattle. We said that a year ago. He came back. There was more of Christine Michael. Everything sort of broke in his direction in order to get another opportunity right now. Impressive in the preseason, but really could not put out anything other than what he was given by the offensive line, which, as we know, is not a lot. So you need that type of running back, like a Marshawn Lynch, like a Thomas Rawls, like a CJ Procise, who can get more than what the offensive line gives you, just like Russell Wilson does every week. So it's not that unexpected. But Rob, you've obviously been following Christine Michael quite closely since 2013 when the Seahawks drafted him in the second round. He didn't get much playing time there in the first 2 years. And then, of course, the third year, we know all the craziness that happened that season. But does the move surprise you? What would you say to people who think that this is a bad move for the Seahawks?
Well, I don't know how anybody could say it was a bad move after watching CJ Procise against New England and the fact that Thomas Rawls is going to be back healthy, hopefully soon. And, there's no real pressure on Rawls now because Procise had such a good game. But the thing about Christine Michael, and he was a guy that we studied a lot. I remember we did a podcast on the night of the draft and we talked about Christine Michael right before the Seahawks drafted him. And if you just sort of watched his tape for Texas A&M and you watched what he was capable of and you saw what an amazing athlete that he was and some of the great plays that he had for Texas A&M, there was a lot to like there. And as a college prospect, you would say, this is a guy worth taking a chance on, that if it all came together for him, he had the potential and the upside to be one of the game's best NFL running backs. But that is the issue with Christine Michael, is that I don't think he realizes. I hate the thought of this, but I think that probably in 10 or 15 years' time, Christine Michael's going to look back on his NFL career and wish he could do it again because he's blowing it. And he has got more talent than possibly anybody in the NFL. I mean, he's that much of a fantastic, unique, twitchy athlete that he could be as good as anybody. And yet it just doesn't work for him. I mean, his technique is still appalling. He's wired differently. If people remember at Texas A&M, he essentially got in the doghouse there as well because they just stopped using him halfway through the season and said, we don't want anything to do with you. He was sort of going into the NFL draft. People were expecting him to be a late round pick because of that. And then he had the great workout, and the Seahawks took a chance on him, which I think was a fair chance to take. If it had worked out, then he would have been a major success for them. But when the Seahawks were traded him to Dallas, they subsequently got rid of him. He was on the Washington practice squad when the Seahawks had an injury crisis. Lynch was injured. Rawls got injured. They didn't have anybody they could rely on. Robert Turbin had been injured earlier in the year, and they'd waived injured him. So they had nobody. They had actually nobody they could turn to. And Christine Michael was a guy who knew the team, knew the setup, knew the scheme. And, they brought him off the practice squad and gave him a second chance. And it seemed like over the summer he was taking that second chance. But, old habits die hard. And as the season was going on, you started to see some of those old habits come back. And even though we're not privy to how he acted on the in the locker room or when he was practicing during the week, you could see that there were little things that were very familiar with Christine Michael, the body language, that some of the frustrations that you saw when things didn't work out. And when he popped up on the injury report, Danny O'Neill at 710 ESPN, who's very, very connected with the team, suggested on his radio show that the injury, the hamstring strain, wasn't maybe down to an actual injury that he popped up on the report, but maybe it was a bit of face saving. Maybe there'd been an issue there, a twist of some kind last week, which was Christine Michael reverting to type again. And I think we see now that probably was the case, that they didn't want to create a drama or any distraction before the New England game. So they carried on as usual. There was a report from, was it Field Yates or somebody? I think he's done the news today, but I think there was somebody, was it... So the guy who was at the NFL Network, whose name I can't remember, but he reported that John Jenkins was going to sign for the Seahawks, a big defensive tackle. So it seems like the decision was made early last week, and they just waited till after this game to avoid the distraction, and now they've pulled the trigger. Christine Michael gone, John Jenkins is signed today, and we move on. In terms, just one quick final point on this, apart from the technique issues and all of that, and perhaps a slightly quirky personality. I don't know about anybody else, but I was really, really tired of seeing Christine Michael stumble over on the football field. It seemed like every time that he would get the football, he was falling over. And he just was not making the most of his opportunities. And when CJ Procise comes in and does exactly that, takes his opportunity, I have no issue with this team moving on. It's a good draft for running backs coming up. Now the future is Procise, it is Rawls, and probably a rookie in the next class.
You couldn't really ask for more. The fact that they got Thomas Rawls last year at undrafted free agency, and he leads the NFL in yards per carry, and he leads in, DR and DVOA, and the fact that you get that right in the first year that Marshawn Lynch starts to fade away, and then next year you add CJ Procise. I mean, it's really quite the pull there for Pete Carroll and John Schneider. The fact that they had scouted, obviously had high expectations of Marshawn Lynch back in 2010 when there was, a lot of questions about his future in the NFL, and that they managed to get him for what they got him for, and then brought in, Rawls and now Procise. That it's kind of, you want to say these guys have a perfect track record with running backs, but of course there is Christine Michael. So the fact that they drafted him in the second round and didn't get much out of him over his less than 4 years with the team, it's an interesting thing to look for. But it also, you can look forward to next season with how they're going to approach the draft in terms of running backs, what they're going to do with Alex Collins. Are you at all surprised with Alex Collins sort of looking? I hate to say terrible, because he hasn't been out there very much, but when he has been out there, it hasn't been very exciting. I do want to say that he had a game a couple weeks ago where he made 2 plays. He was on the field for 2 snaps, and they were both, one of them was a touchdown, the other was a crucial first down. So there is still maybe some hope for Alex Collins, and I think there's a pretty clear reason for why they would choose Alex Collins over Christine Michael, like many reasons. But any sort of surprise with Alex Collins' season, or based on what you had seen during his career at Arkansas, did you think he'd be further along at this point? Because obviously the opportunities were there for him to steal some carries away from Michael, and it never happened.
I think the problem with Collins is that he when he runs and the very few opportunities he's had in Seattle this year, he's running very tentatively. He looks tentative at the line, and it looks to me like he's overthinking things and trying desperately not to make a mistake. And the only way to sort of get over that is to have a lot of carries and to sort of get into a rhythm and to sort of just feel comfortable and confident that you are meant to be and that you belong. It's hard to do that. I mean, if you get one carry in a game, what is your focus? Is it, I'm going to hit this line hard and I'm going to take a chance and try and break off a 20-yard run? Or is it going to be, don't fumble, don't fumble, don't fumble, don't fumble? And then, of course, you do fumble the ball and you think, oh, God, and that's your chance gone. I suspect he might have got, because if you notice in the game on Sunday, Precise was checking out all the time. He kept sort of tapping out and going to the sideline. At one point, it was caught on the TV. Carroll referenced this when he spoke yesterday. There was one time when Precise was checking out the game, and Carroll went, "No, get back on the field." And you could see it on the TV. He was like, "Get back out there, get back. You can't keep coming off all the time." So because he was doing that, I think they would have liked to have given Alex Collins maybe, I'm not saying they would have given him 6-7 carries, but he may have had 2 or 3. He got 1, and that's because he fumbled the ball. And this is the issue that Collins is having here. And in college, he was a guy who would get lots and lots of carries in a run-heavy offense, would get a head of steam going, was a bit of a runaway beer truck, really, going hell for leather, attacking the line of scrimmage. And in Seattle, he's not really in a position to do that because he's being asked to come in and have an impact in a very reduced role. And actually, in fairness to him, two of the actual plays he's had this year was the big 3rd down conversion against Atlanta, which led to the game-winning field goal, and a touchdown, I think it was, in the same game. So, he has actually had an impact in the small amount of snaps that he's had, but he just doesn't seem to be getting many opportunities, and it's perhaps positive for him that they haven't cut him and promoted Pope or haven't moved on. They clearly think there's something there, and if there was another injury crisis, I think that's one of the reasons why Michael has gone, is that if they lose Precise or Rawls, they will probably just move Alex Collins into a greater role. So they clearly like the guy. I just think that, the fact that he's not getting many opportunities, the fact that there isn't really a defined role for him there, and he's only a 5th-round pick, it might mean that next camp he is fighting for a job with a newly drafted rookie. And if that drafted rookie's in the 2nd or the 3rd round and he's really explosive and he's kind of really sparky and twitchy and looking good, then he's going to have a job on his hands next year.
Yeah, it's interesting. Something we didn't talk about much, at least I didn't hear many people talking about it. I didn't talk about it. The Patriots came into the game 5th against the run in DVOA. And, CJ Precise had some really nice runs. He finished with 3.9 yards per carry, but outside of his goal line carries, his 2 goal line carries, which, obviously were not good because they didn't result in touchdowns. But outside of those two carries in which you're expected to get maybe a yard, he averaged 4.7 yards per carry. And obviously we saw how dangerous he is as a receiving threat and how he can sort of blossom into, a full-time, legit, big money receiving threat. When we started to talk more about Precise and look into who he is as a player and what Pete Carroll might be looking for in a player in his offense, I really think that his future is 85, 90 catches during his peak seasons, which is going to pair so nicely with a guy like Thomas Rawls. But Patriots, really good run defense, and the Seahawks successfully ran against them, and they've got more tests coming up. The Eagles, going into, we haven't had updated DVOA yet, but going into last week, the Eagles were 11th against the run. The Seahawks still have to play them. They'll play them this week. The Cardinals are 10th against the run. The Packers are 6th against the run. The Panthers are 4th against the run. The Rams are 7th against the run. So they've got, and if they make the playoffs and face the Cowboys are 8th against the run. So they're going to be facing some of the best running defenses in the NFL. And it's pretty interesting to see. And they need as many guys that are going to be successful as possible. And it's important to prepare themselves for the best, that's yet to come. So that's going to be really interesting to watch. And I'm sort of curious, Rob, when you talk about drafting a running back next season, if that's something that Seattle wants to do, What type of running back do you think that will be? And you've talked about maybe some guys that you like in the first round or something. But who would you say is like maybe an Alex Collins, maybe a guy who is being very productive at the college level that'll be a nice third-day pickup?
Well, I wrote a piece for Field Goals. If people haven't seen this yet, then you should still be able to pick it up on the blog if you have a look for a look at the Field Goals website. I posted a link to it on Seahawks Draft blog as well if you missed it. And the guy that I think is probably the best bet at the moment is a guy called Elijah Hood, who plays for North Carolina. The Seahawks, and I mentioned this in the piece, have very much got a preferred physical profile of their running backs. I mean, there's too much data there now to ignore this. And people can look at 250-pound running backs if they want. They can look at 195-pound running backs if they want, or whatever. The Seahawks are consistently drafting guys who are around 5'10" in height to 6 foot in height, and about 220 pounds. I think the averages of the guys they've taken. So you're talking like Turbin, Spencer Ware, Kristen Michael, CJ Procise, Alex Collins. They're all, if you average out those guys, their weights are almost identical, and it averages out about 221 pounds. So it's going to be somebody in that sort of 220 range. There are not many running backs like that. Now, admittedly, there are going to be some exceptions to the rule. If Leonard Fournette was there for them, who is about 235 pounds, I can't imagine the Seahawks passing on him. But equally, if there's somebody who happens to be 230 pounds, who isn't of anywhere close to the physical skill set of Leonard Fournette, then they're probably not going to take him. And Elijah Hood is 6 foot, same as Procise, 220 pounds, really cool personality. Really, like a cool guy. But when he talks about being physical and finishing runs, and how he loves the game and stuff like that. And it doesn't seem phony. It's not just saying the right things for the sake of it. He seems to have a passion for the game. He's been relatively productive this year. If you actually look at his last 2 years, he's got 2,100 yards in a season and a half, 25 touchdowns. So he's been really productive. I think that because of the class, Kenny, because there are going to be, your Fournettes, your Cooks, your McCaffreys, Royce Freeman, who I don't really like, Nick Chubb, people like that, because they're going to end up going in the early rounds. There's a chance that someone like Elijah Hood could end up sort of falling into round 3 or round 4, which is the range that they took Procise. And I think if you can get Hood at the end of round 3, that could be a really interesting pickup. A guy who can compete with the other two guys, fits what they've been looking for, potential to be a starter in the league. I think he's a guy that we really should focus on here. And when I watch the tape, he does finish runs. He is quite twitchy. He's quite sparky. Like, get real nice burst to get to the second level. Doesn't run out of bounds. The things that the Seahawks look for. So based on the data that we've got, Elijah Hood at North Carolina is, I may have said North Carolina State earlier. It's definitely North Carolina. He is one of the guys that we need to look at.
And the Seahawks have also released Silver Siliga as well. Just a note there, they've also got parted ways with Siliga as they sort of continue a rotation there. Defensive tackle guys coming in and coming out, and so quickly you can hardly keep up. As we talk about the Seahawks, I think it's kind of interesting that this season, for whatever reason, the Seattle defense has been somewhat overlooked. Maybe it's because there's been such a focus this season on their, running game and their lack thereof, and the offense, that we haven't really acknowledged the fact that their defense really seems to be as dominant now as it has been in most of the last 4 seasons. I mean, you could probably point to a more dominant season like 2013 or, 2012. I think, there were times when they were really just on fire. For the last 5 games, they've allowed 24 or 25 points. But I think so many of the touchdowns that they've given up this season are not, lapses in the defense. And they've only allowed, just recently they've allowed, a couple 3 first quarter touchdowns. Up until then, they hadn't allowed, any. And they've had such struggles in the third quarter, and we can acknowledge that they've had struggles in the third quarter. But overall, second in scoring defense. They're really close to leading the NFL in scoring defense for 5 straight seasons, which is unbelievable in the free agency era. and just constantly like being able to continuously rotate out that cornerback spot and that Sam linebacker spot and the defensive tackles, and they keep moving them around. And I think, the fact that they're being overlooked, it means that we're also overlooking some of the players out there, because we spend so much time maybe talking about Earl Thomas or Richard Sherman for good reason. We talk about those guys. We talk about Michael Bennett. We talk about Russell Wilson in the offense and everything like that. But how about the fact that Bobby Wagner leads the NFL in tackles with 94 tackles, and, looks like, with the season the Panthers are having with Luke Kuechly, it's going to like sort of depress Luke Kuechly's, value in the eyes of people out there. And maybe Bobby Wagner can be an all-pro this season with the type of year that he's having as well. And, Bobby Wagner, by the way, is 26 years old. I mean, how many more seasons does Bobby Wagner have left? 10? I mean, it's just, it's crazy to me. KJ Wright, 27 years old. He's having a phenomenal season, and Cam Chancellor returns this weekend against the Patriots, helps them beat the Patriots on the road 31-24. We haven't even really mentioned that yet, but you knew that already. And Cliff Averill, 9 sacks in 9 games, on pace. Maybe he'll be the league leader in sacks. He's there. He's 1 sack behind the league leader. So it's pretty unbelievable. And Frank Clark, what a season by Frank Clark. Rob, what do you think about the defense this season, the way they've been playing? Their ups and their downs, because we know about some of the issues they've had. Do you think that the issues that they've had on third down are like a problem? That obviously they're a problem, but is it something that can't be fixed because of personnel, or do you expect them, to maybe only really be keyed in and running on, 100% as they head into, December and potentially the playoffs? Do you think that's something they can fix? And what do you think about, the return of these guys like Cam Chancellor and eventually Michael Bennett?
Well, I think this is one of the reasons why they have made this switch at defensive tackle, and bringing Jenkins in, because for me the big difference is last year. If people look back to last year, the Seahawks absolutely destroyed the running game of their opponents. I mean, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think they gave up a 100-yard rusher for the entire regular season. I mean, they just took away the run. And while they did give up some big plays on third down and gave up some big plays to tight ends, especially earlier in the season, and had some very frustrating moments on defense, because they were taking away the run game, it was putting them in very favorable third down situations. The problem they've had this year is that the running games of opponents have had a lot more success. So teams are regularly getting sort of 5-6 yards on first down, which is putting them into second and short, then ultimately third and short. And it's a lot easier to convert those types of downs against what is predominantly a zone defense. You can manipulate it a little bit to get those extra yards. So what the Seahawks need to do, and they're bringing in a 350-pound nose tackle here to replace Saliga. What they need to do is get a bit of extra bulk up the middle. I think that they've missed Brandon Mebane a little more than they perhaps hoped they would. And while I think Jaron Reed is doing pretty well, I think they were hoping that Reed was going to pick up the slack from Mebane, and I don't think he's quite achieved that just yet. I think that Mebane has been a big loss for them. It is allowing teams to have a little bit more success on early downs in the running game, and Jenkins is coming in here probably as a first, second down type. Jenkins may even just play first down in the own half of the opponent, and then get him off the field as soon as he's got the first down out of the way. I mean, just stop people running up the gut on this team. And you were seeing it the other night again. I know that the overall yardage for Blunt wasn't particularly great, but he seemed to be just pushing the pile and getting an extra couple of yards in every run. They need to cut that out. And if they can get teams into 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 8, they've got a better chance of getting off the field and playing to their strengths, which is at the moment a pass rush with Cliff Averill and Frank Clark, and an excellent secondary play. So that is what they need to do to turn this around. And I think that they're being proactive about it. They're making the moves to try and see if they can find a solution here.
Cam Chancellor, a lot of people talk about, Michael Bennett's contract situation. in the same way that a certain blogger with the initials KA said that Kristen Michael would be released last week, saying that. And here we are in the situation where Michael's been released. Same said blogger says that the team will give Michael Bennett a contract extension in December. And that's just something that, we'll see what happens. But Cam Chancellor contract situation, it, like you know his value to the team. A lot of people out there saying, hey, he can't stay on the field, and I don't want to pay him because it's my money. But obviously, come on, it's not your money. And they've managed to figure out a way to keep everyone together. The Seahawks aren't hurting for cash. They're like $26 million in cap space next year, and the only person that they have to sign is maybe Steven Hauschka. So Cam Chancellor's contract situation, what do you expect them to do in that situation? I'll just say that.
Well, I've written a piece about this, and it's a subject that interests me, but not in the reasons that not in the way that I actually want to really have the discussion every week about it. And what I've kind of noticed over the last few weeks is that some Seahawks fans want to talk about getting rid of somebody nearly after every game. So if the offense has an off day, Darrell Bevel has to go, or Tom Cable has to go. Maybe Jimmy Graham. I had someone within the Seahawks draft blog community was writing about cutting or trading Jimmy Graham after the Saints game because he said the Seahawks weren't using him properly and we weren't getting any benefit out of him. And then of course he had the terrific game against Buffalo the next week, and Jimmy Graham's on pace for a 1,000-yard season. And now it's. I was very surprised when someone brought up the possibility of trading or cutting Cam Chancellor in the offseason again this week, especially after he'd had such a key role in the New England game, forcing a fumble, which was recovered by Richard Sherman, which I believe led to the touchdown, which extended the lead to 7 points, which was an unassailable lead eventually. And also he made the key play against Gronkowski. I mean, like, Rob Gronkowski is a legendary tight end. He's one of the best players that's ever played the game at that position. And he's 1v1 against Cam Chancellor with the game on the line, and Cam Chancellor wins the play, and that won the game for the Seahawks at the end there. And we're talking about getting rid of Cam Chancellor. I mean, it's incredible, and like there's all sorts of things that you could run down. I have absolutely no issue with the fact that Cam's missed 4 games this year. If Cam Chancellor plays 12 games a year, who cares? If people want to know that Bobby Wagner missed 8 games between 2013 and 2015. So he's missed time. KJ Wright missed, I think, 4 games in the first 3 years of his career. Michael Bennett missed as many games as Cam Chancellor did between 2010 and until last season. They missed the same amount of games as each other. Cliff Averill missed, I think it's 7 games in the first 3 years of his career. There are players on Seattle's defense that have missed as many games as Cam Chancellor. The idea that you can rely on anybody to play 16 games a year apart from your quarterback is fanciful at best, because it's a very physical league, and the way that the Seahawks play in particular is very physical. So they're going to pick up injuries. Cam has not had a serious knee injury, or he's not got chronic back problems. He's had a groin strain, and it's taken a little longer than we all would have liked for him to get back, but he's back and he's playing tremendously well. There's a really interesting piece on Field Goals breaking down just how well he played against New England, and I would recommend that people go and read that. I heard Matt Hasselbeck on the radio, on ESPN radio today. He said, the Patriots think Michael Bennett is the MVP of Seattle's defense, but I think it's Cam Chancellor. Why is Matt Hasselbeck saying that? Matt Hasselbeck knows a thing or two about a defense. He said that Cam's the MVP of the defense. And as you rightly mentioned, Kenny, the Spotrac is projecting the Seahawks to have $24 million in cap room next year. Why would you need to cut Cam? Well, they don't need another $8 million that it would take to cut Cam. They can swallow $8 million. They could probably give him a $2 million pay rise next year and still live with it. I mean, he's set to be the 7th highest paid player on the team next year. The 7th, not the 1st. The 7th highest paid player on the team. Is he in the top? Is he among Seattle's top 7 players? Damn right he is. He's ahead of like Bobby Wagner in terms of cap hit next year by about like $300,000 or something like that. Here's another thing: the cap hit's $24 million right now, Kenny. The cap room's $24 million for next year. They'll make another $2.5 million on the cap room when they cut Jamarcus Webb in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually going to be nearer $30 million. The Seahawks can afford to give a pay increase to Cam Chancellor, Michael Bennett, and Cliff Averill, and still go and bring in a couple of decent guys in free agency. I mean, there is absolutely no reason to make any kind of saving. And I'll just finish with this. If people want to know how important Cam Chancellor is to this team, not just as a player on the field, I mean, forget the fumbles and the Gronk play and the punching the ball out the 1 yard line against Detroit and the fumble on Adrian Peterson, which helped win the Minnesota game last year. Forget all of that for a minute. Just go and watch the video pre-game of Cam Chancellor with every other member of that team surrounding him, and him leading the chant, and him and every player hanging on every word that Cam Chancellor says. And then go and see the image after the game, which a lot of people have posted on Twitter, of Pete Carroll and the team celebrating. And who's right next to Pete Carroll? Right at the heart of that thing, it's Cam. You know, this guy is the heartbeat of the team. When he speaks, people listen. When people need somebody to go to speak to confer about a matter of life, you know, as opposed to just a football matter, they go to Cam. You know, he's the man that leads that team in the locker room, and in a way that is absolutely net. You need guys like that on a team. There is zero reason to cut Cam Chancellor. There's zero reason to even talk about it. He's one of Seattle's finest, most core players, and you will never find another Cam Chancellor. There will not be another one in the draft. There certainly isn't another Cam Chancellor playing in the NFL, not even close to it. To get rid of one of the truly unique players in the league to save a few million when you've already got nearly 30 million in cap space is just, I do not understand it. And I really wish we would stop talking about moving on from him, moving on from Jimmy Graham, moving on from Bevel and Cable, and let's just get behind the team who are giving that city and this fan base a great opportunity to celebrate another title this year.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, you know, the games that Cam Chancellor has played in, you know, week 1 to week 4, they gave up 10 points, 9 points, 18 points, and 17 points. 7 of those points coming against the Jets on that weird fumble return. 18 points to the 49ers, almost all of them coming in the fourth quarter, you know, pretty much all of it coming at the end when the game was 30-point lead. The amount of first downs that they had given up in that game were like 11, 17, 12, and 20. And then in the 4 games without Cam Chancellor, they gave up 24 points, 6 points, 25 points, and 25 points. They gave up 22 first downs, 23 first downs, 28 first downs, and 30 first downs. And then he comes back this weekend, and I think giving up 24 points to Tom Brady and the New England Patriots at home, coming off a bye week when your team had traveled across the country. I mean, you know, it's pretty much, I mean, the writing seems to be on the wall there. Not going to put it all on Cam Chancellor, but certainly a significant difference. And, you know, when you look at the 2013 playoffs, he was the MVP of that team in the playoffs, and definitely a huge reason that brought them that Super Bowl. I want to quickly turn over to college football, and then we will move back over to the Seahawks and the Eagles preview at the end of the show. And we're going to talk plenty about the Huskies and Cougars. It's weird and wild weekend in college football, as you know, the teams that lost, you know, include Clemson, number 2, Michigan, number 3, Washington, number 4, Ohio State wins, Louisville wins, Wisconsin wins, and then number 8, Texas A&M loses, number 9, Auburn loses, and number 14, Virginia Tech loses. The Cougs with another blowout win. But, you know, the Huskies, they lost to USC, and the rankings that came out after that, we haven't gotten the college football playoff rankings as of right now. Maybe they'll be released during the recording, but the way the rankings changed was Alabama, of course, stayed at number 1, and there's a clear number 1, and there's not even any competition pretty much for the whole season. They don't need to play any more games. The Alabama Crimson Tide has won the national championship. Ohio State moves up from 5 to 2. Louisville moves up from 6 to 3. Michigan, you know, goes down from 3 to 4, but they stay in the top 4 of these rankings. Clemson moves down from 2 to 5, and Wisconsin leaps over Washington to number 6, with Washington being in at number 7. Rob, do you feel that the rankings were fair? Do you feel that do you think that Wisconsin with 2 losses should be ahead of Washington with 1 loss? Do you think that anybody who stands the best chance matchup-wise of beating Alabama, and will that team make the college football playoffs?
No, I don't agree that Wisconsin should be ahead of Washington. I think that's a joke. and I'll be very surprised if that ends up being the case after the college playoff. I mean, I understand why they've put Wisconsin there. Their two losses are against Ohio State and Michigan, and the AP will argue that they've put them at 2-4, so that's better than Washington because Washington's lost to USC. But I like to sort of I like to look at a team if I was sort of part of any kind of decision making on who should be ranked where. I like to look at a team and sort of see what it has. And when I look at Wisconsin, I see a team with a very inconsistent quarterback, an offense that is not particularly threatening, that does lean on the run game. But if you take that away, can they pass to win? Very doubtful. When I look at Michigan, and this is one of the issues I had with Michigan, I kind of felt like they were being overrated anyway because of the Harbaugh factor. And then they blew out a lot of bad teams. And yeah, you know what? Fair play, they're destroying everybody, so you put them high and they were undefeated. But I kind of did feel that, and I do still feel that when they play Ohio State that Ohio State's going to win that game pretty handsomely because Michigan's quarterback was poor, and now he's injured, and I think he's out for the year anyway. So they're going to have to play the backup quarterback. Their running game it's neither here nor there. They don't have major X factors on offense. They have Jay Chesson, who's had a quiet year overall. They have Jake Butt, the tight end, who doesn't put up big yardage, but is pretty good in the red zone. And on defense, of course, they've got Peppers, but Jabril Peppers alone, they've got a few other good guys who are going to go to the NFL. People like Taco Charlton, the defensive tackle Wormsley. But it's not a loaded roster, and they're number 4 now, and they lost to Iowa, and I think they will lose again. For me, I would have Alabama at number 1. I would seriously consider keeping Clemson in the top 4. I mean, it was a pretty entertaining game, but for some really bizarre situations, Clemson would have won the game. They've already beaten Louisville, who are number 3. So, I don't see, Louisville's 1 losses to Clemson. But they're 2 places ahead of Clemson in the AP poll. I don't get that. I mean, I would be tempted to put Louisville and Clemson in the top 4. And then I think you make the decision between Ohio State and Washington to be the other team. And I wouldn't definitely put Ohio State in there. I think that Ohio State looked like a team that's in a bit of a transition. I don't think that if they get to the playoffs, they will, for example, have anywhere near the success they had last time they got there with the major NFL talent they had, led by Zeke Elliott.
I fear that looking at it now, I almost fear that because they have, decided to rank Ohio State and Michigan 2 and 4, that when Ohio State plays Michigan, if it's a close game, and let's say Michigan wins, 31-30. I fear that they would be tempted to put them both in the college football playoffs just because they were the ones that ranked them high to begin with and would say, well, this is the greatest football rivalry of all time. Why not just put them both in and cost a team, with 1 loss the opportunity to be in the college football playoff? Do you think that's something that's possible?
Do you know what? There's another dynamic to this, Kenny, which not many people have talked about, and that is that because Ohio State lost to Penn State, and Penn State lost to Michigan, even though Penn State has lost 2 games, at the moment, they are all tied for the lead in the Big Ten. So if Ohio State beats Michigan, who've already beaten Penn State, this is going to get a bit complex. Stay with me here. But if Ohio State wins against Michigan, then it comes down to a Penn State-Ohio State double act. And Penn State have the tiebreak because they beat Ohio State. So what's going to happen here is if Ohio State beats Michigan and Penn State's last 2 games are against Michigan State, who are horrible this year, and Rutgers, who are abysmal. So you would imagine that Penn State's going to win out, which means that if Ohio State wins, guess what? Ohio State and Michigan don't go to the Big Ten championship game. Penn State goes there. Now, the College Football Playoff Committee are going to have a real tough time putting both of those teams in the playoffs if neither of them are in the Big Ten champion or didn't even get to the game. I mean, you could even make it, because they've put a priority, and they've actually, I think, stated this, put a priority on conference champions. It could be that Penn State end up in the top 4 if they win the Big Ten. and it's not a ridiculous suggestion there. And this is the advantage that Washington have, is if it is Penn State that goes to the title game, then they may be able to justify putting, for example, Ohio State in the top 4. But they can't keep out Washington if they win out and then win the Pac-12. They have to. They will. There is without a doubt. I mean, they'll deliberate between putting Ohio State in there or Penn State if it comes down to that, or both. But they will not be able to keep Washington out. It will be Washington are guaranteed to be there. It's whether or not you put Ohio State or Penn State in there or both or whatever. So I think one way or another, Washington wins out, wins the Pac-12, they will be in the top 4.
Well, this is the inevitable conversation, and it's one that's been had for. This is the reason that some people were against the playoff to begin with. The conversation has to now turn to, should 8 teams be in the playoffs? And I asked that question to you.
Well, maybe I'm up for more teams being involved in the playoffs. But at the same time, I must admit, I'm really sort of entertained with the fact that it's just the 4. That there is, as soon as you start, there'd be no real doubt at this point. Imagine the drama of Saturday and how incredible it was to see the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th team lose. And that drama would have pretty much been non-existent if, for example, 8 teams are in the playoffs, because it'd be pretty much a safe bet that all 3 of those teams would still be in the top 8, and they are in the AP. So it wouldn't really have much impact there. But the fact that they all lost suddenly made this a real talking point. Who the hell do you put in there? Do you bump Louisville up? Do you keep Clemson in there? Do you keep Michigan in there? The Washington survive. There's a lot of decisions to make. One other quick point I would make on this is that sort of reviewing the teams, Washington have got a fantastic quarterback. They have a lot of star talent, John Ross, people like that. The defensive line's really good. I know they've lost a pass rusher, they've lost a Asim Victor, but there's NFL talent on that roster, and you don't really see that in Wisconsin. There's a bit of that in Michigan. Ohio State's young. Louisville's basically one guy, the Heisman Trophy winner this year, and that could easily get them in there. But I look at Washington's team and I think that they warrant, from looking at the names and looking at the production, they warrant to be in there. And I suspect we will see a situation where it's Alabama, Louisville, or Clemson, the Pac-12 winners, Washington, if they get there that far, and then one of Ohio State, Penn State, or Michigan. But the big thing for Washington, Kenny, is if they lose to Washington State, there's absolutely no chance for them. That game is huge now. I'm going to go and watch the Huskies against Arizona State this weekend. I suspect they will win that game, and then it will come down to the Apple Cup. What a game that's going to be! Incredible game. But if Washington State win it, Washington State's got no chance of being in the top 4 because they lost to Eastern Washington in the first game, and then Boise State. But they could get to the Pac-12 final. You would expect them to win that. Then they would go to the Rose Bowl. So there's an awful lot still for both teams to play, and it's going to be very, very interesting for both of them.
Yeah, you're going to see Washington play Arizona State. I am going to Colorado to watch number 20 Washington State play number 12 Colorado. It's the first time in 13 years that the Cougs have played a game in which both teams were ranked in the top 25. So it's exciting for a Cougs fan to be, experiencing this. But, I'm a little worn out with trying to talk about why Washington State should be ranked higher than 20th, because, at this point, if they win out, they've got 3 games left against most likely 3 teams in the top 15 of the rankings. They've got number 12 Colorado this weekend. They've got number 7 Washington next weekend, and they could be ranked a little higher. And then if they go to the Pac-12 championship, perhaps playing USC, who are currently ranked 15th. And I'm just looking at it, I'm like, how in the fuck did USC skip from not being ranked all the way up to 15 for beating Washington? And it's like, and the Cougs moved up from 23 to 20. And I'm just like, so the only Cougs loss besides the Eastern Washington loss was a 3-point loss to Boise State, who is 9-1 and ranked 22nd, and is Boise State. And then the loss to Eastern Washington, the best team at their level, pretty much an Appalachian State, basically, with legendary players for that level at wide receiver and quarterback. So it's like, Yeah, I can't get, it's fine. You can't. I think, you can forgive them given when you look at Washington State's schedule since those first two losses. You look at Oregon, 51 points on Oregon. You look at Stanford when they were ranked 15th. They go to Stanford, they beat them 42-16. They beat UCLA. They go to ASU. They beat them 37-32. They go to Oregon State. They beat them. They play Arizona. They win 69-7. They play Cal. They beat them 56-21. And the reason that I can't really forget, I'm over complaining about it is, hey, if they win these next three games, they'll be ranked in the top 10. And if they're not, I mean, that would be an absolute disaster. And we can't expect them to have any shot at getting into the college football playoff, which is fine. I don't necessarily need to see my team lose 69-0 to Alabama, so I'm fine with that. But
which won't just happen to Washington State either. I think that might happen to quite a few teams that end up playing in the playoffs.
Right. It's going to be ugly. And, it might be better to go to the Rose Bowl. I mean, of course it would. I mean, it's hard to, I can't believe we're saying that, we can actually say these words. It might be better to go to the Rose Bowl. It probably would be better to go to the Rose Bowl, get yourself a Rose Bowl win, and forget about this college football playoff. So that's fine. But what do you think about Washington State's ranking, based on what they've done? Are they a better team than USC? Are they a better team than Colorado? Obviously, you haven't had the chance to watch them every week, but in your estimation, do you think that, their resume is worthy of being higher than 20th? Can we forgive them for a loss, 3 months ago to a pretty decent, albeit FCS team?
Well, that's obviously playing a part here. I mean, the teams who are above Washington State in the AP poll have not had a loss to Eastern Washington, and I think if it was Boise State and somebody else, then they would be a lot higher than that. That said, there seems to be a lot of reputation voting going on. I mean, I've not been impressed with anything that Florida State's really done this year. Aside from what I think that Derek Nandy, DeMarcus Walker, and Dalvin Cook have been really good. And there's the guy who's had that seven interceptions, the sophomore, his name I've forgotten, McFadden, I think it is. Out short of that, Florida State have been massively disappointing. Auburn have been. I mean, they were just horrendous against Georgia at the weekend. I don't see really what LSU have done to warrant being number 16. And you get sort of the usual suspects, like Oklahoma State's number 13. They're 8-2, which is the same as Washington State. Is that because for the Oklahoma State's been a pretty consistent team for a few years? Possibly so. I mean, I would argue that if Washington State was in the Big 12, then they would more than likely be number one in the Big 12 and probably winning that conference. So, I think it's time for the people making these decisions to just let that loss go in the first week. We saw what Washington State did last year. They had a similar loss, I think, to Portland State, and then became really, really strong. It is possible for a team to start slow and then turn their season around. Hey, we're Seahawks fans. We see this every year with the team. So I don't think that one loss in the first game should be held as a point to dictate exactly the rest of the season for Washington State. I think a fair ranking for them would be up where Oklahoma State are right now. I mean, Western Michigan, good for them that they're 10-0. But you can't tell me that Western Michigan is a better team than Washington State right now. Might be a close game if they met, but I think that Washington State are the better team. And I don't think that Western Michigan are the 14th best team in the country either. I think they'd probably lose to USC. They'd probably lose to LSU. They'd probably lose to Florida State, who they're all ahead of. So, we could quibble a lot about this. I think there's a legitimate case to be made for Washington State certainly being in the top 15.
Lest we forget, that Washington State is the only undefeated team in the Pac-12. They're in first place in the Pac-12, 7-0 conference record, and they've done everything that they can. I mean, just blowing out teams that used to be much, much better than them. And it'll be interesting if the Cougs go and beat Colorado this weekend, say 39-31 or something like that. Do you think that they would get the votes necessary to be maybe swap places with Colorado and get that number 12 ranking? Do you think that that's the respectful win that voters are looking for?
Yeah, I mean that would they would have no excuse then. I mean because they've put Colorado where they are. That's going to be a tough game for the Cougs, but winnable. But if they win that game, then yes, I would suggest that is time that would be enough evidence there to legitimize Washington State, and I hope it happens as well. I mean, I hope that both teams win this week. It would be great to have Washington. Who knows what's going to happen this weekend? But let's suggest that they're a top 5 team, top 6, probably at the least. After beating Arizona State, and let's imagine that Washington State's in the top 15 at the very least. Maybe top 12. Then imagine the Apple Cup buzz. I don't know if we'd get it over here in Britain. I don't know whether that's a game that Fox have got some kind of rights to because it's Pac-12. We don't get the Fox games over here. We only get games that are on CBS and ESPN. Yeah. But I would love to see that game so much. So I hope that if anybody's listening from Fox, please don't broadcast that game.
Yeah, it'll be as much as I don't know what to do because if the Cougs win, not only will I be extremely elated, but if Washington loses, that gives Washington State the Pac-12 North and puts them in, to the championship. So I want, on one hand, if Cougs win, I want to maybe see Washington lose just so we can secure that and, not have so much stress on the Apple Cup. But also it'd be really exciting to have an Apple Cup where the winner goes to the Pac-12 championship and they're both ranked in the top 15. And Washington, obviously at that point will be ranked 7th or 6th or maybe 5th. So it'd be really interesting, but it's nice to have games for both teams that matter. And can you imagine a world where the Cougs lose to Eastern Washington in week 1 and maybe end the season against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl? I mean, just an unbelievable turnaround. Did you see anything this weekend from players in next year's draft that changed your opinion of them dramatically one way or the other and for any team?
I didn't, I must admit. I watched Georgia against Auburn, and it wasn't the best day for Carl Lawson, the pass rusher. Nick Chubb didn't really show me anything that he hasn't shown already this year. Those are the two main players I was looking at. I watched Florida play, and I thought Brantley had a decent game, but a lot of their star talent is injured. Alex Anzalone didn't play in that game. Jared Davis didn't play in that game. The two great linebackers. I thought it was a pretty easy game for them overall. And
what did you think of Deshaun Watson in the loss to Pitt? He goes 52 of 70.
Yes, I did see that. I watched that game as well. I thought he had a real sort of boom and bust day. So he you could absolutely annihilate him for the 3 interceptions, and the last one, which went for a big return and gave Pitt a chance when, that if they score that touchdown, Clemson, they win the game. And he throws a red zone interception. It was terrible. You could annihilate him for that. But at the same time, they're in position to win that game because of him as well. I mean, he was pretty good at times in that match too. So I think what we've seen from Watson is maybe he's not handled the light being shone on him this year. That the expectation was that he was going to be a potential number 1 overall pick. He had a fantastic year last year. I mean, he's making mistakes this year that he just did not make last year. And I think that either he's bought into his own hype, or he's took his eye off the ball, or he's looking ahead too far. And teams are going to be worried about this. It reminds me a little bit of the way that Geno Smith collapsed. He started the year really well at West Virginia when he was going for the draft in his final year in college. And then as soon as people started to talk about him as potential number 1 pick, he just imploded and was horrendous. And we're seeing a little bit of that of Deshaun Watson. I still think he's better than Geno as a prospect, a lot better. And I still think there's a chance that he could sneak into. I think he's going to fall a bit now. I don't think he's going to go quite as early as we thought, unless somebody like Hugh Jackson just says, no, this is the guy I need to build this team around. We can work with him. He has got the skill set. We just need to tweak a few things. Then I think there's a chance he's going to fall. But look, Cleveland have 2 first-round picks. They might be able to get him with that 2nd first-round pick now. They might be able to do that. So there's every chance he could go there. I could see someone like the Steelers taking a chance on him. Big Ben's not going to last forever. He was flirting with retirement, either before or after the Seahawks game last year, and suggesting that his mental health, or not mental health, his health of his brain, with concussions and stuff like that, was something he was taking very seriously this day, so that he might decide that he's had enough in 2 or 3 years' time. And if you've got somebody who could step in and go to work immediately, then that would be a good progression plan for them. And plus, Landry Jones is a free agent, so I can see that. So I think he is going to drop a little bit. He's not going to go in the top 10 anymore, I don't think. But still a chance that he could go in the late first, maybe early second. And we've seen quarterbacks go in that range and have success. The latest being Carr in Oakland, of course. Andy Dalton's done it as well. So it wouldn't be a death sentence for his career if that happened.
Yeah, Watson was the leading passer in terms of yardage this weekend, though it took 70 attempts, and he did have those 3 interceptions. Steelers is like a really great the image just makes a lot of sense of him going to the Steelers. So that's a really interesting, mock moment there. But the leading rusher was running back from LSU, not Leonard Fournette. His backup, Darius Guice. I'm just going for a shot there. 21 carries for 252 yards, 12 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns. Who is he? And what is his future like in terms of, being a guy that shares the ball with Leonard Fournette?
He's another 5-star recruit. He's an absolutely terrific player. I think that I fully expect. I know that Leonard Fournette has been quoted today as flirting with the idea of returning to LSU next year, but I think this is just posturing and playing to the crowd a little bit here, not wanting to seem like he's already checked out, and sometimes it's the worst thing to do with a few games to go is to say, yep, you know what, I'm thinking about the NFL, because all the coach will do is say, you're not mentally right and you're not playing for us. That's happened to players. I think he wants to finish things right at LSU, so I expect him to move on, and then Guice is going to come in. He's going to be the number one. He's such a good player, Kenny. Really, really good player. I don't think he's eligible for the draft for a couple of years yet. Not sure if he's a true freshman or if he's a redshirt, but he is somebody to keep an eye on. As there are not many good offensive linemen coming through the college ranks. There are not many good quarterbacks, but there's certainly a lot of good, talented running backs and defensive linemen coming through, and Guice is one of those.
Moving back to the NFL here, we're going to talk about maybe some of the stuff going around the league, the Seahawks and their matchup this week against the Eagles. But, let's touch briefly on the Dallas Cowboys, 2 guys that are rookies there, Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott. And it'd be really interesting to see a scenario in which could Ezekiel Elliott be the MVP of the NFL and could Dak Prescott be the Rookie of the Year? I don't know, maybe. They both have their cases for, that Rookie of the Year award, but Elliott certainly got a strong case for MVP. And, for me, being a guy that said that picking a running back 4th overall was one of the dumbest things you could do, I certainly don't look that smart myself after Elliott's, rushed for 1,005 yards, by far the league's leading rusher, responsible for 10 touchdowns. He's good in the passing game. He's good on the ground, 1,255 yards from scrimmage, going for, the rookie rushing yardage record. But most of all, the Cowboys are 8-1 without their starting quarterback, at least the starting quarterback at the beginning of the year. And now, they've now turned to Dak Prescott as the current and future quarterback for what could be another, 12 to 15 years, as Tony Romo even saying, look, this is difficult. But I know I can see what everyone else can see, which is that Dak Prescott is the guy that should be starting for the Cowboys right now. What are your thoughts on, the Cowboys as they stand as the only team between the Seahawks and the number 1 seed, and perhaps when the playoffs come around, the only team between them and the Super Bowl? Do you think that the Cowboys are overrated? Do you think that they are as dangerous as an 8-1 team should be? And what do you think is going to be the key for teams to start, stopping them, especially as Des Bryant seems to be getting comfortable with Dak Prescott a little bit more each week?
Well, first of all, what an incredible speech that was by Tony Romo today, and very, very, very unselfish, and shows what a team player he is, because he's come out and he's totally eliminated the dynamic of who should be starting, and are they going to make a change and all of this. He's taken it out of the team's hands and took control and just said, look, Dak Prescott's the guy who should be starting right now. And by doing that, he takes that dynamic away. Now, it may be that Dak Prescott will have a slump of some kind, and they may well want to turn to Tony Romo. We saw that it didn't really impact Denver that badly when they were playing musical chairs at quarterback last year with Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler. They won a Super Bowl. So if they did need to make a change down the line, they could still do that. But all the credit to Tony Romo for that, for what he's done today. And that will not have been easy for him, because he must so badly want to lead Dallas, having been through so much, into a championship season. And he may never get that chance now, but I think that somebody will definitely be interested in taking him next year, and it will not be a surprise as the Cowboys move forward with Dak Prescott now that he ends up quarterbacking a good team. I'm not going to speculate on who might do that, but there's quite a few that would be interested in Tony Romo to start, I imagine. In terms of the Cowboys, we know they've pumped so much into creating an identity, which is tough up front. I think that the loss to the Seahawks in 2012 in week 2 was symbolic for them. I think that Jerry Jones watched the Seahawks. I think they had an 8-minute drive in that to the fourth quarter of that game, where they just de-pantsed the Cowboys, quite frankly. And I think Jerry Jones made some comments after that game saying, we need to do that, and we need to be that kind of a team. And they've gone with that. They've been quite fortunate as well, because the draft picks, the slots that they've been drafting in every year, it's, people can say, do what the Cowboys do and draft like they've done and draft the offensive line. Well, yeah, but you're not going to be sat there with Tyrone Smith just sat on your lap, ready to take him. You're not going to be sat there in the middle of the first round with someone like Zach Martin just waiting there. Travis Frederick, people raised an eyebrow when that happened, but was always destined to go in the range that he did. People were projecting him to go in the late first round. They took him in the late first round. Big deal. They've built an offensive line, doing smart picks, but not, no real major insight here. It's not like they've shocked the world by drafting any of those guys. And now they've got Zeke Elliott, and you put him behind that line and you let him run around, and he's going to make plays for you. You've got Des Bryant on the edge. You've got Witten at tight end. That's a great collection of talent. No surprise at all that Dak Prescott, who's incredibly poised and level-headed and does not seem to be, we talk about someone like Deshaun Watson struggling with the limelight on him. Well, Dak Prescott's the total opposite of that. It's a bit like Russell Wilson. He seems to be thriving on the attention, and he gets time in the pocket because of the O-line. He gets favorable coverage situations because teams are so concerned about the run game that they're focused on that, and then it gives him opportunities because he can break contain, because he's mobile. That's another thing that teams have to consider. So it's kind of like a triple threat, really. Are they going to run the ball? Is Dak going to throw from the pocket? Is he going to scramble around and make plays? And on the scramble type of drill, that's really, really difficult to defend. So they've got a terrific offense in that regard, and that will be tough for any team to stop. But what I will say, the defense is horrible, and the defense is doing enough. They're bending and not breaking at the moment. But I don't know if you saw the Pittsburgh game at the weekend, Kenny. Pittsburgh had about like 20 seconds or something to get a touchdown drive, and did it like it was taking candy from a baby. And I do fear that the defense in a playoff game will be a problem for them. They don't have any good pass rushers. They don't have a DeMarcus Ware these days that they can rely on. They don't have a great deal of talent in the back seven either. I mean, there's some decent players there, but Sean Lee's not Kuechly or Wagner, and their cornerbacks are not fantastic. I kind of feel like, I don't know what you think, Kenny, but I kind of feel like Dallas look like a team that will have a really good regular season, but I could just see them losing in their first playoff game. They should have lost to the Eagles at home a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, and they could easily have lost to Pittsburgh at the weekend. And Pittsburgh are like 4-5 now or something like that. So it's not like they're that great, and the Eagles aren't that great. And I think when they get really tested, they might just wilt a little bit. So good for them at the moment, playing really well. Tough team to beat. Are they particularly scary? They're kind of scary, but not petrifying. We're not talking about the Niners under Harbaugh or anything like that. So or the Patriots with Brady and Belichick. So yeah, they'll be tough, but certainly not I'm not going to lose any sleep about the Cowboys.
Yeah, and it'd be really interesting to see the situation that they're going to be in when you have Jason Garrett, who I think has coached one playoff game in his career, and Dak Prescott, who has obviously played in none, and Ezekiel Elliott, who has played in none, and a roster. I don't want to say that inexperience isn't necessarily going to be a situation where that has to work against them. But how many of those first-time playoff teams would, the Seahawks won in 2013 after playing 2 playoff games the year before. The Denver Broncos won last season. They've been in a ton of playoff games. The New England Patriots are in playoff games every single year, obviously. These are the championship teams. Even look at the Baltimore Ravens. They had gone to the playoffs every single year until finally breaking through in 2012. So these are experienced teams, and maybe this isn't Dallas's year. Maybe it is, but if you get a situation where Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman and Russell Wilson and all these guys have 10, 12, whatever it is, playoff games under their belt, and they go to play the Dallas Cowboys, even if it's on the road, that's not a game that I necessarily fear as much as I may fear, even going to Lambeau, as bad as the Packers are. And they won't have to go to Lambeau, but even playing the Packers, at least Aaron Rodgers has, 8 playoff games or something probably under his belt. And there is, it's just a different situation. It's a different beast. And it's certainly something where it's like, yeah, and especially going up against the Dallas Cowboys, because the things that give the Seahawks the most fits when they can't score points is, a good pass rush. And the Dallas Cowboys do not have that. Even close to. And you look at the way that the New England Patriots dismantled their pass rush with getting rid of Chandler Jones, and then, trading Jamie Collins, making their defense even that much more weaker. And we saw Russell Wilson put up a fantastic game, and Russell Wilson now getting into that mode that he always gets into in the second half of the season. And where will Russell Wilson's season end up? Is he going to be an MVP candidate as himself this year? I think there's already cases being made, despite the fact that he's only thrown, 9 touchdowns. Here he is, 2 interceptions, the fewest he's ever had through 9 weeks. Here he is putting up, huge games like he had on the road against New England. So definitely Dallas is a team that I think, if that's the best team that the NFC has to offer, and Football Outsider is posting an article just now about how the Seahawks may finally be emerging as the dominant team that the NFL has been lacking all season long. And, I'm sure they would like retries of games against, the Rams, which they will get, and the Saints and the Cardinals and all that kind of stuff. But as far as the complete package, I think, there isn't a team in the NFC anything like the Seahawks. We were seeing the Minnesota Vikings fall from 5-0 to 5-4, and the Atlanta Falcons falling to 6-4, and there isn't really much to go for. Who would you say in the NFC is a team sitting in that 4, 5, or 6 win range that scares you the most in a playoff situation? Whether it be, we've got the Giants and we've got the Eagles, who we'll see this week, and there's the Lions and the Saints, who have already beaten the Seahawks, and these are teams that are not dead in the water because of how close everyone is, except for the Cowboys. And even the Cowboys, they've got games left that they could end up falling out of first place in the NFC East, because the Giants are, seem to be playing much better recently, and they'll have another shot. And the Giants already beat the Cowboys in week 1. So certainly it's going to be open up. But which of those potential wild card teams or sneaking in the bushes, potential winners of the NFC South or NFC North, which of those teams do you think it could be the most dangerous in January?
I don't feel particularly threatened by any of them, but I will. The one I would pick is probably Green Bay, and it's just because of Aaron Rodgers. Because look, Green Bay's defense is soft. Don't have many good players there. Don't have a running game. Don't really have. We can talk about Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb and people like that, but they've not got a Des Bryant, have they? They've not got a fantastic tight end there. But there is it's Rodgers. I mean, you could come up against him and he can have one of those days and he wins. And look at what he did last year. I mean, Green Bay went to Arizona. They're going to lose the game. He has that incredible Hail Mary. He has 2 damn Hail Marys in the season. He had the one in Detroit as well. He is just the type of player that you might beat Green Bay 9 out of 10 times at home, but that one time out of 10, Rodgers will do it by himself. So, I wouldn't worry about facing Sam Bradford, and I wouldn't worry about facing some of the other quarterbacks in the conference. Yeah, Drew Brees, you can mention Drew Brees, but I just think the Saints defense is that bad. I know that they beat the Seahawks recently, but I just think their defense is that bad that on the road in Seattle, perhaps in inclement weather that won't suit Brees' passing game. And, Rodgers is physically superior to Brees. I just think that Rodgers is the one. And look, we only have to look back at the 2014 NFC Championship. That was a game that I fully expected the Seahawks to coast along in. To have a pretty, maybe not coast is maybe not the right word, but a very similar game to maybe the previous one against Carolina in the playoffs, which was a good, solid Seahawks win. I was expecting that again, but for some miraculous plays at the end of the game, the Seahawks would have lost that game and Rodgers would have gone to the Super Bowl, maybe even won the Super Bowl that year. So while Green Bay are pretty crappy at the moment, I still would be wary of Aaron Rodgers. And I think this is going to be the case when the two teams meet in Lambeau in a few weeks. Rodgers will always give Green Bay a chance. They were being beaten down by Tennessee at the weekend. Rodgers makes a few plays, they're suddenly back in it. You can never count the guy out. I mean, whatever you think of Aaron Rodgers, the guy he's pretty incredible, and he will always give his team a chance.
Let's do a final segment on the show. Let's do a little rapid fire questions. I'll ask you quick questions, and try and you answer in the form of, let's say, under a minute. The Cleveland Browns are 0-10. They seem almost certain to get the number 1 overall pick, though Robert Griffin III is said to potentially be back to return by the end of the season, and I think they'd like to maybe see something out of him. Perhaps maybe they'll be comfortable to roll with Robert Griffin III and Cody Kessler, who has had a surprisingly good season, especially given everything around him. The Cleveland Browns do look certain to pick number 1 overall. Who do they take?
Based on what they did last year, probably the guy with the most stats. I mean, that seemed to be how they made nearly every pick. I want to give you a quick fire answer, Kenny, but nearly every player they took last year was the guy who made the most yards, the guy who made the most sacks, the guy who had a load of numbers for USC at quarterback. So it's probably going to have to be somebody with some degree of production. I think that the favorite right now is probably Myles Garrett. I could see them taking Peppers or Leonard Fournette. I think that probably right now I would say either Garrett or Fournette, with a quarterback potentially as the second of their 2 first rounders. So maybe a double dose of a double dip of Garrett and Watson, let's say.
The San Francisco 49ers right behind them at 1-8. Nobody else has one win. They're the clear favorite for the number 2 overall pick. Who is Chip Kelly is going to be, keying in on for his second season, and which could be, if the 49ers go 2-14, Chip Kelly once again could be coaching for his career. So, he needs to maybe do something that's going to be impactful right away, or at least give hope for the front office. So 49ers at number 2, what do you think they're looking for?
Well, first of all, I think Chip Kelly will be somewhere else next year. I watched his body language against Arizona the other day and just felt like we were watching a coach who knew that it didn't really matter. That not that the game didn't matter, but that he looked relaxed. He looked to me like a guy who knows that whatever happens now, he's going to be back in college football next year, and that he's maybe just coaching through these last few games and enjoying it and enjoying himself and taking chances. They were going for it on 4th down. They were doing all sorts of stuff. They were being creative. Chip Kelly looked as happy on the sideline on Sunday than he ever has in the NFL. And I just got the sense that this is a guy who knows he's going to be either back at Oregon next year or coaching at LSU, or I think he'll probably be back at Oregon. As for what the 49ers are going to do, Peppers. I think they'll take Peppers.
Which team in the AFC West goes deepest in the playoffs, and how deep do they go?
Which division did you say?
Which team in the AFC West? The Raiders, the Chiefs, and the Broncos. Who makes it the deepest into the playoffs, and how deep do they go?
Great question. Raiders got the best offense, but bad on defense. Kansas City, not in the least bit exciting, but getting the job done. Denver, boom or bust. I'm going to say Denver, just because they did it last year. They've proven that they've got players who can take them deep into it. Trevor Simeon's better than Peyton Manning was last year, so they will give themselves a chance in every game. I just think Kansas City, while ever Alex Smith is the quarterback, while ever that Andy Reid's the coach, are going to be a team that look really good during the regular season, but will always have a lay an egg at some point in the playoffs. And I just don't think Oakland are ready yet. I think they're probably a draft away, and a free agency and a draft combined away from getting that defense going. And maybe within a year or two, the Raiders could be the cream of the AFC.
General Manager Dave Caldwell, head coach Gus Bradley, quarterback Blake Bortles. Who needs to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars? Is it all of them? Is it one of them? What changes need to happen for Jacksonville?
Well, probably all of them. The Bortles definitely needs to go. I mean, it's just not worked. That project has just not worked. He's throwing ridiculous interceptions at the start of every game. The one he had at the weekend, the pick six, was just horrendous. And he made no attempt to make the tackle afterwards as well. And his body language afterwards, kind of throwing his arms up in the air, having a flounce afterwards. It's just not right. It's just not worth that pick. Colwell made the pick, put his faith in. Whenever you take a quarterback in the top three, you put an immense amount of pressure on that guy to succeed. And you put an immense amount of pressure on yourself for him to succeed, because if he doesn't, you carry the can. So he has drafted names, and that's not really the way to build a team. Just drafting the bigger names in each class. And Gus Bradley needs to go, because unfortunately for Gus, he's not getting the best out of those players. They're not. Who's overachieving on that roster? Alex Hearns, is that it? Allen Robinson last year, he's not having a great year this year. So the entire roster's underachieving. So that comes down to the coach. So you've had bad drafting, coaches not developing the players, quarterbacks not performing. I think they need to clean house and bring somebody in who can be do it all. If they really want to follow the Seahawks, don't just appoint the Seahawks defensive coordinator from 2012. See what they did and get a coach and a GM who work hand in hand, with the coach being the VP of football operations like Pete Carroll, experienced guy who knows what he's doing, and let him go to work.
Yeah, interesting. Jacksonville has turned the ball over 12 times in the last 5 games. They have taken away 0. They have no takeaways in those games. Finally, the LA Rams have chosen Jared Goff to be their starter this week for the first time, going up against the Miami Dolphins at home. So it'll be Jared Goff in LA making his NFL debut, as the Rams are dead last in scoring, 31st in yards, dead last in first downs, 25th in passing yards. Pretty much nothing working for the LA Rams offense. They said they would not play Jared Goff until they were knocked out of playoff contention. That hasn't happened yet. They just won on the road against the Jets, albeit with 9 points. And they need to get they feel now finally realize that they need to get some sort of offense going. And maybe they would have a chance to win some games and not, and have a winning record. But maybe too little, too late. Expectations for Jared Goff this weekend at home against the Miami Dolphins?
Well, I think that he's getting a chance because of, I suspect there's probably some pressure from ownership there. You've gone all in on this quarterback. He's not playing. The offense is not improving with Case Keenum in the slightest. I mean, it's just not getting better. It's a bad offense. Todd Gurley is being impacted as well. He's still in the bottom 3 for yards per carry in the entire NFL. And the 2 guys behind him are Matt Asiata and McKinnon, both in Minnesota. Nobody else is below him for yards per carry. They're wasting Gurley. They've shown to have some weapons on offense now in terms of the passing game. Their defense is as good as it's always been. And I think that I suspect if you're the owner of the team, you're saying, well, why aren't you playing this guy? We made this big move for this guy. We're in LA where we've got the Cal quarterback. Everybody else is playing. Nearly every other rookie quarterback that's drafted has played. Why isn't this guy playing? It's time. It's time. He can't do any worse than Case Keenum. And they've got a point. I think the big concern for Goff will be that if he gets hurt and they can't protect very well the offensive line there, and he's mobile, but he's not Russell Wilson. He's not Tyrod Taylor. He's not Mariota. He's not Dak Prescott. Is he going to be able to move around in the pocket and make plays? He got hit a lot in preseason. If he holds onto the ball and second guesses or double pumps or whatever, he's going to get hit. So my expectation for him is to get a little bit beaten up, take some lumps, probably make more plays than Case Keenum. But I also expect him to turn the ball over. And it might be that I suspect we will see what we saw in college, which is some really pretty passes, some nice touchdowns, but a few awful-looking turnovers as well.
So Seahawks, Eagles, we haven't really talked about it at all. We haven't talked about the Eagles much. There's another rookie quarterback, Carson Wentz. We've talked about Dak Prescott. We've talked about Jared Goff, but Carson Wentz, his overall numbers pretty decent, especially for a rookie. 65% completions, 9 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 6.8 yards per attempt. I've talked a little bit to some of the Eagles blogging guys, and just talking about how, look, this guy's got nobody except for Jordan Matthews to throw to. They're going with a different running back on any given play. They've got a 3-headed monster there that they really truly are using. Doug Peterson, the former offensive coordinator, now the head coach. The way that he's utilizing Carson Wentz, and I think fans of the Eagles say that you can't really put too much into Carson Wentz stats. He makes good decisions, and once the personnel improves around him, and once he gets more comfortable, that the numbers will only continue to get better from there. Overall, the Eagles have a number 3 scoring defense, number 6 total defense, but maybe struggle against the run a little bit. I guess earlier I said they were 11th in DVOA. They're 24th in yards per carry. Overall, the Eagles seem to be a team that it's hard to put a judge on what they really are. They good or not? They started out 3-0, but they've lost 4 of their last 6, including a loss to the Minnesota Vikings and a loss to the Atlanta Falcons, sort of giving those teams a little bit more hope. Wins over the Minnesota Vikings and the Atlanta Falcons. And all 4 of their losses in these last 6 games coming on the road, and now they have to go play the Seattle Seahawks. What are your thoughts about the Philadelphia Eagles overall as a team? And sort of how much of a turnaround have you done on Carson Wentz from draft day to right now?
I think that I kind of liked Carson Wentz, and I didn't study him prolifically because there was no point really. The Seahawks weren't going to draft him, and that's that. I'm not. I don't spend. Having spent sort of the first few years of the blog, sort of just almost exclusively looking at quarterbacks. It's nice to be able to focus on other positions, but I've seen a fair bit of the Eagles this year. They've been on TV a lot over here, and I saw quite a bit of their game at the weekend on Red Zone against Atlanta, and they seem to run the ball nicely, and it does seem to take. I don't know what the stats are. I don't know if this is just the games I've seen, but with Ryan Matthews and Wendell Smallwood, and who's the name forgot, the guy who used to be at New Orleans, the running back. What's his name?
Which running back?
Smaller running back. He used to be at New Orleans.
Sproles.
Yeah, Darren Sproles. So
yeah.
He's looking really sharp as well. So they've got a nice little trio there. They a bit bizarre the way that they work them all in. So like Ryan Matthews or Sproles will have a really good spell. All of a sudden Smallwood comes in and they don't really work with a hot hand. They do really distribute the snaps there. But it does take some pressure off Wentz. The offensive line's not good. They've lost Lane Johnson to a suspension, and there is some success for Seattle to be had there. Their receivers, Nelson Aguilar, having been the most consistent guy at USC, he drops passes, he's real hit and miss. Jordan Matthews, a player who was plagued with drops at Vanderbilt, is having the same issue in the NFL. Their tight ends are unspectacular, but capable of making plays. I don't know, is Zach Ertz healthy? I seem to think he got hurt in the last game. I'm not sure if he is healthy or not.
Doesn't show up on the injury report as of most recently.
Okay, so he may be okay, but you look at it and you think, yeah, you know what? There's. I mean, I saw a tweet earlier from someone who studied the game. I think it was Adam Kaplan who said that he thinks the Eagles will struggle to get 10 points in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I hope that's the case. I suspect they will get more than 10, but I think there's some success for Seattle to be had there. I think that the key is the defense. The defense is playing very well. It's very well coached by Jim Schwartz. Very good coach. Probably be a head coach again next year. Defensive line. I've always liked Connor Barwin. You know, I think if Connor Barwin was in a draft right now, the Seahawks would draft him because his athletic profile is sort of ideal for the Leo position. He's had an incredibly explosive combine. Had real great production in college. Always liked him. Fletcher Cox is pretty good. They've got one or two others. You know, Brandon Graham, I've never been a big fan of his, but he's having a really good year. They don't have great talent at corner in the secondary, though. And I think at linebacker, you can get to them. So it's a case of, can the Seahawks offensive line hold up? I think it's great that Wilson is looking as sharp as he is and looking as sprightly as he is. I think he's going to have to move a lot more to evade pressure this time because the Philadelphia defensive line is a lot better than New England's. And there will be a creative game plan from Schwartz. So I think it's going to probably be on the pass again. I sincerely hope the Seahawks win this time. The last two times, Kenny, I've flown to Seattle to watch a game the Seahawks have lost, which I personally think is incredibly bad luck given the amount of home games they've won over the years. I'm hoping it's not going to be a hat trick this weekend. And I will take any kind of win. And I will also say this, that if there is any little bit of concern I have, Kenny, it's that if they'd have lost to the Patriots on Sunday, I think there would have been a feeling about this game. Look, we need to win this one. We've got to have this one. We can't lose to the Patriots and lose to the Eagles. We have to have this game. And there's a little part of me that just wonders, I hope they're not going to buy their own hype now. You know, they've just won against New England in New England. I hope they're not going to think that this is an easy one now against a 5-4 Eagles team at home, that they're just going to turn out and the game will take care of itself. I don't think that could happen, but I'm a little bit wary that there might be a letdown this week, that either the performance won't be as good as everybody thinks it's going to be now because the Seahawks are back and they're beating the Patriots and wow, they're going to win the Super Bowl. Either the performance will not live up to expectation of that and they will still win, or they're going to be given a bit of a blooded nose in this one. And I really, really would love nothing better than a comfortable win, but I'll take any kind of a win.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's hard to not think of this. It's hard to not go into this as perhaps the most confident that the fans has been of any game this season. Week 1, you never know. Week 2 at the Rams, no confidence. The following week, even at home against the 49ers, you had no confidence because the Seahawks had scored 15 points up to that point through 2 games. And then you're going across the country to the New York Jets. And then, you know, the Atlanta Falcons are a pretty good team and everyone's sort of unsure. And then they tie the Arizona. You're not going to be confident going to Arizona. I certainly wasn't going to be confident going to New Orleans after scoring 6 points in 5 quarters and the defense being run down. You know, Monday night against the Bills, you know, there's some confidence there at home, but not a ton. And then obviously the least confident that anyone was traveling to New England. So I think a lot of people are confident, despite the fact that the Eagles were number 1 in DVOA going into last week. I'm not sure where they'll be yet. They're just now updating DVOA. I've only seen the playoff odds updated, but they haven't updated the total DVOA yet. And, you know, despite that, I think more people are confident in this game than they have been all season long, which can be, you know, dangerous for fans. But as far as the team goes, I think the return of Thomas Rawls, who was so special last year, is going to be something to, you know, give them something to hang their hat on. The way that Russell Wilson plays in November, you know, he's the best November quarterback since 1970 in terms of the numbers that he puts up. You know, now he's rolling. He's got 10 touchdowns and 2 interceptions and a passer rating of 99.4. And you only expect that to go up based on how he finished last year and the fact that he's at home. And, you know, the Eagles bring something special to a special memory to my, you know, particular, you know, fandom, being that I really feel like it was a 2011 game against the Eagles. It was week 13, Thursday night football. They're playing the Eagles. And at that point, the Seahawks were 4-7. And there was a lot of uncertainty about Pete Carroll. There was a lot of uncertainty about, the quarterback position with Tavares Jackson and everything, and what kind of a running back Marshawn Lynch was going to choose to be. And then Marshawn Lynch in that game, he rushes for 148 yards and 2 touchdowns. Golden Tate caught a touchdown. But I really remember on defense in that game, Brandon Browner had 2 picks. Cam Chancellor had a pick, and David Hawthorne had another pick. But I recall Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas, after a big play, just being in the end zone, the way that they were all hyped up, and you looked at those guys and you could say, these are special players. And this is a different Seahawks team than any other Seahawks team I have ever witnessed in my life, including the 2005 team. There was something special about the way these guys were playing together with Richard Sherman and, him being a rookie that year, and, Chancellor and Thomas going into their second seasons. And you say, this particular secondary is something special. And then you had, it was right around then that the Legion of Boom was coined. And then the next year when they add, Russell Wilson and add Bobby Wagner and, obviously start winning all the games that they've been winning. So I think playing against the Eagles at home should bring back special memories of how this team started to come together in 2011. And I think that there is, a very special reason for the Seahawks to play this game as hard as they've played, any game this season, and to really prove it, like after beating the Patriots in New England, to not have that letdown and to say that that they are the best team in the NFL when there's been so much uncertainty about who is the best team in the NFL now that the Patriots have lost, because it was so consensus Patriots that you have to now wonder if the Seahawks doing it the way they did it on the road, not at home, on the road, when they were coming off of a 6 days rest as opposed to 14 days rest, and really being able to, prove who they are. And, 2 years ago, they played the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Eagles at that time were 9-3. And the Seahawks went to Philadelphia at a time when, they easily could have lost in 2014, at a time when there was a lot of questions, can they rebound from their Super Bowl, and the Eagles are 9-3, and everything is going fine with, Chip Kelly and LaShawn McCoy and Darren Sproles and Jeremy Maclin and Jordan Matthews. A lot of the guys, not McCoy and not, but a lot of the guys are going to be the same. And the Seahawks won that game 24-14. And they got out to a 17-7 lead, and they won that game 24-14. And Russell Wilson had 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. And they had a really, really good game. Doug Baldwin, 97 yards and a touchdown. So I think playing the Eagles is special, and I think that there should be confidence, but I don't think that confidence will seep out of, lead to bad things. And I think that it should be a good game for Seahawks fans to be watching, and hopefully for the first time in really since October 2nd, so the beginning of October, for the first time, I think we'll finally get a game that isn't so stressful and nail-biting and really difficult to watch.
I wish I could share your confidence in that. I really wish I could. I will say that this Eagles team is a lot better coached than they were under Chip Kelly, and they don't have Vince Young as the quarterback this year. And if there's one thing that does bother me a little bit, is that I could see this being kind of like a 20-10 for the Seahawks type of game, which is really tight. Maybe the Seahawks pull away. I could see maybe like 17-10. I could see a 23-17. But I can also see an incredibly stressful. And every Seahawks home game has been that way, barring the game against the joke show 49ers. The Seahawks needed a final seconds drive against the Dolphins to win. They needed to have a credible late drama against the Falcons, and a bit of fortune with the play with Sherman at the end of the game to win that one. They could have easily lost to the Bills. That was down to the last play of the game. And the Bills threw into the end zone and with a chance to win that one, and the Seahawks scraped through. I need to see the Seahawks. The Seahawks are 4-0 at home. They could be 1-3 easily. I cannot believe that the Seahawks are going to beat a decent team at home comprehensively until I've seen it. And I'm very positive about this Seahawks team and very upbeat about it all of the time. And I think they're going to win this game. But I need to see them beat somebody comprehensively before I believe that's going to happen. I genuinely believe this is going to be really close. And I hope so much that beating New England is not going to lead to a letdown, because I think everybody expects the Seahawks to be so good now and on it, and it's the second half of the season, and this is when the Seahawks do well, and they beat the Pats away from home, so they can beat the Pats, they can beat anybody at CenturyLink, and CenturyLink Field is not. When is the last time the Seahawks beat a good team at CenturyLink comprehensively? Is it like 2013?
Since they've beaten a good team by a lot at home.
Is it the Saints game? Is it the same? Is it Panthers in the playoffs 2014? They've had a lot of tight games at home. They play. It's partly their style, but I think teams come to CenturyLink and feel this is our chance to send a message to the league. This is our chance to go face to face with the Seahawks, and they raise their game. And the Seahawks have not had. They don't blow people out at home. So I really hope this is going to be a comprehensive win. But I'm just a little bit cautious, and that might be because I'm going to the game and it's 5,000 away. But I'm a little bit cautious.
2014, they beat the Cardinals 19-3. It's not a blowout, but snuffing out in 11.
Yeah, they had Drew Stanton at quarterback though, didn't they, in that game?
Oh yeah. So not a lot. I think the Green Bay Packers, week 1 of that season, 36-16. It's been a while.
That's a good one. They beat the Panthers very convincingly.
But my prediction probably falls along the 28-14 type range. I don't even know if they allow 2 touchdowns. I'll say 28-13. I do think that the offense on the Eagles side will have a really hard time scoring. Just because anytime I see a situation where a team doesn't have more than one, real receiving threat. I mean, Zach Ertz could be the problem if there is one, but definitely it's going to be an issue because the Seahawks have a good opportunity to stop number 1 receivers, and so you have to have other things there, and that's why Darren Sproles could be a problem maybe. But overall, with the way that they played on defense against the Patriots, with all the things against them, I do have confidence in this game for Seattle's side, and that's all we can do. I didn't have a lot. I would have picked the Patriots to win last weekend, so anything could happen. But again, this is a team that now has every week it's now to the point where every week they extend that streak of not getting blown out, and now we just sort of ignore it until another 6 games have passed and go, oh yeah, it has been even longer since that 2011 game against the Bengals. So every week there's got to be some level of confidence for the Seahawks, and certainly at home against Philly there should be a good amount of confidence, and hopefully I have a lot of confidence in Russell Wilson. And a convincing home win against a team that has done very well for themselves so far this year would be pretty interesting. And we can't necessarily ignore the fact that if the Eagles win, they'll only be a half game sort of behind Seahawks with that head-to-head win. And they'll be pushing themselves into a situation where if they can catch up to the Cowboys or something like that, it could have playoff implications. So important for Seattle to win. Hopefully they realize that, and I know they do, but they get that, they'll do well. So enjoy yourself at the games this weekend, Rob. I will enjoy myself in Denver, Colorado, on my way to Boulder, Colorado, to watch the Cougs face the Buffs. We'll have a very special episode next week where we can talk about our traveling experiences and hopefully a Seahawks win over the Eagles. Follow Rob on Twitter at Rob Staton with an O, Staton, or at SeahawksDraftBlog.com, and follow me at Field Goals at Kenneth Arthur S and at FieldGoals.com. That's it for this week's episode of 3000 NFL Mock Draft. This has been this edition, and we will see you on the next draft.